What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burtnett, and welcome to one of those weeks that we look forward to. We set aside Saturday on the calendar because this week 4 action is absolutely loaded. Before I dive into matchups, though, if you're going to enjoy this video, please feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel so you see more college football talk on a regular basis, and turn on those post notifications so you're always up to date. But without further ado, let's dive into those matchups, starting with Oklahoma at Cincinnati. So looking at this Oklahoma-Cincinnati matchup in Week 4, Cincinnati comes in off of a disappointing loss to Miami. They've had back-to-back kind of tough games. They were able to beat Pitt on the road 27-21, but then a tough loss to their rivals in overtime. And Oklahoma, meanwhile, has had a fairly easy slate. They just dispatched of Arkansas State in their opener, 73-0, and then took care of SMU, future ACC team, SMU and Tulsa by a wide margin. Dylan Gabriel right now is among the best in college football. He's thrown for 905 yards. That's just over 300 a game for the former UCF quarterback, and 11 touchdowns, just 1 interception. And so the Oklahoma offense has been just absolutely thriving this season. 358 passing yards per game, 176 rushing yards per game for a total of 534. But Cincinnati's offense can move the ball as well, led by quarterback Emory Jones and running back Corey Geiner. They're totaling around 525 yards per game, a pretty even split in terms of passing and rushing. Defensively, Oklahoma, obviously Brett Venables, a defensive-minded head coach, has them playing well, 80 yards rushing per game allowed, and 209 passing yards per game. Cincinnati's a little bit stronger against the pass and a little bit weaker against the run. It's in Cincinnati. It's a noon game on Fox, but I think Oklahoma is getting back to where they were before Lincoln Riley left, and I think they are able to pick up a big road win against a formidable Big 12 opponent. This is Cincinnati's first game in the Big 12 as well, and I think it might be a little bit of a rude awakening. I'd expect this one to be pretty close to what the spread is, 14. I think Cincinnati covers in this one, but overall it should be a competitive contest. Cincinnati motivated by a tough loss to their rival last week. And the other game in the noon Eastern slot is one that I think going into the season we expected a little bit more heading into this matchup in terms of hype and everything, and maybe even having this as a top 10 matchup. But instead, it's number 4 Florida State at unranked Clemson, obviously suffering the loss to Duke in their opener, the season opener on Labor Day. Florida State, meanwhile, led by Jordan Travis, has had a pretty strong start. Obviously a good start, good win over a really good LSU team in the season opener, beat Southern Miss. And then last week, this is the thing that I think Clemson should try to focus in on, is limiting Keon Coleman, because Boston College showed, even though Johnny Wilson and some other guys are going to get good catches, if you're able to limit Keon Coleman, that kind of, I wouldn't say completely shuts down the Florida State offense, because Travis and running back Trey Benson are able to move the ball, but when you shut down Keon Coleman, it becomes a little bit tougher for the Seminoles to move the ball. So if Clemson can do that, and they've done well really defensively overall, they're only allowing 246 yards per game, 148 passing yards per game, 98 on the ground. If they can shut down Keon Coleman, they can keep this game close and interesting. Florida State on the road in Clemson's Death Valley is favored by just 2 points. I think that's a pretty good spread. I think this game will be close. Clemson will be trying to show that they aren't out of the college football playoff picture yet. And I think it might come down to a winning field goal attempt. And I think Florida State is able to just edge the Tigers to pick up a big win to continue in ACC play. So moving into the next game then, moving into the 3:30 Eastern time slot, we've got Ole Miss at Alabama. Alabama has looked pretty rough the last couple of weeks. Against Texas, the offense had some positives. They had some plays. I think they will benefit from having Jalen Milroe as this QB1 that was named earlier this week. But they come up against an Ole Miss team that can absolutely pass the ball with the best of them. Jackson Dart has 852 yards passing, 7 touchdowns, just 1 interception, and has also run the ball for 213 yards and a touchdown. Ole Miss has a lot of yardage on offense, 526 yards per game, and their defense has certainly struggled. Tulane in week 2 was a good opponent that put up some yards, but overall was limited to just 20 points. Georgia Tech, same sort of thing. They were limited to 23. And so Ole Miss, they're coming in. Alabama is still favored by 6.5, but I think it's going to be a little bit closer to than that. And we know with Alabama, when sometimes the kicking game for the Crimson Tide can be an issue. And if it comes down to that, I think that could be the difference. And I think Ole Miss either makes a field goal, benefits from a missed Alabama field goal, and makes it 3 for 3 in these first 3 games of the road team getting the victory. I have Ole Miss getting past the Crimson Tide. And I will say, Crimson Tide team that is being doubted in any way is always dangerous. That's kind of has their backs against the wall, always tough to pick against. But I think Ole Miss is able to get the job done on the road. Going through this next game a little bit quicker, you've got injury-riddled Utah hosting UCLA. In spite of the injuries, Utah is 3-0. They're not putting up a ton of yardage on offense or a ton of points. They've scored 24, 20, and 31 in their wins. They've played a couple of good defenses, though. They played against Florida and Baylor, winning both of those. And however, I think because of the struggles that they've had, they'll be tested greatly by Dante Moore and Carson Steele in the UCLA backfield. Both of those guys Moore has 615 passing yards, 7 touchdowns, and Steele has 243 rushing yards and a couple of touchdowns, 527 yards for the Bruins offense. Rice Eccles Stadium can be a little bit testy for teams to come in and play at, but I think UCLA gets the job done as well and makes it 4 teams on the road getting victories. And now moving into one of the real marquee ones. These have all been ranked matchups so far, but Colorado at Oregon, Coach Prime heading into Autzen Stadium. This is their first real big test. I know TCU was a test, but there were a lot of holes in TCU's defense and even some limitations on offense as well. The Buffaloes now face an Oregon team that has a Heisman candidate quarterback in Bo Nix, has just shy of 900 passing yards, 8 passing touchdowns, and leads a Ducks offense that is putting up 587 yards per game. Of course, on the flip side, you've got Shedeur Sanders, the Colorado quarterback, who is even more proficient in the passing game with 1,251 yards, 10 touchdowns, and just 1 interception. So I expect the ball to fly around Autzen Stadium, a lot of passing, but I do think Oregon, favored by 21, I think Colorado covers, but I think Oregon ends up winning by about 10. So the Ducks are the first team in these predictions to pick up the home win. Final game, out of the Pac-12, you've got DJ Uiagalelei and Oregon State at Cameron Ward and Washington State. Good couple quarterbacks again. That's kind of been the theme in this one so far. Oregon State has a good offense and a good rush defense. They haven't played really high-level opposition yet. They have wins over San Jose and San Diego State and UC Davis. But they've done a good job of limiting the run, which won't matter as much because Washington State's only averaging 135 yards per game. But I think the Beavers are able to get the job done. They're favored by 3 in Pullman, Washington, are able to get the job done over the Cougars, who did have a good win over Wisconsin, but I think the Beavers match up just a little bit better here. They will have to slow down the passing game. Mentioned Cameron Ward, he's just shy of 1,000 yards already through 3 games. But if they can limit that a little bit, this will be a good win for Oregon State to potentially boost themselves in the top 10. They're number 14 right now. And then moving into the nightcappers, first one is what I expect to be a whiteout in Happy Valley as Penn State hosts Iowa. Iowa's offense has not quite lived up to the expectations. They were limited by Utah State in game number 1, and then Iowa State. Iowa State has a very tough defense, especially against the pass. One of their cornerbacks, TJ Tampa, is one of the top cornerbacks in college football, among other defenders in the Cyclones, for the Cyclones. But they did get things going more last week against Western Michigan, putting up 41 points. Penn State, meanwhile, has been really comfortable on offense. They're averaging 467 yards per game. Pretty good split, 259 passing yards, 208 rushing yards. So the Nittany Lions, they've got Drew Aller at quarterback, who's definitely lived up, I would say, to some of the expectations. He led them to a solid win last week at Illinois, a team that's kind of disappointing a little bit in my eyes, but regardless, it was a good win for the Nittany Lions. Beaver Stadium is always tough to go into. The Nittany Lions will be tested by a really top-level defense. Illinois was one of the best in college football last year. They lost some guys to the NFL. Iowa this year has also had one of the top defenses, but they bring back a little bit more of that production and kind of retooled a little bit, I think, and will provide a challenge. But ultimately, I think Penn State is right around what the spread is. It's Penn State minus 15. I think Penn State probably wins by a couple touchdowns, I think. And now moving into the marquee matchup of Week 4, and by the time we get to this one, we will have already had a full day of college football, but it's just getting started because we have number 6 Ohio State at number 9 Notre Dame. It's, again, the marquee game of the day. It's where game day is going to be, and it should deliver a really exciting matchup. So the Buckeyes will go into South Bend against a 4-0 Fighting Irish team that is really multifaceted. They can run the ball like they have in the past. Estime, the running back, has really done a great job this season. Probably one of, if not the top back in college football, with 521 yards, 5 touchdowns, averaging about, I think, 8.3 yards per carry, which is an extremely efficient rate. And so the Buckeyes defense, they've done well against the run. A disclaimer on that, though, is that Western Kentucky and Youngstown State both pass the ball more frequently, but against Indiana, the Buckeyes held the Hoosiers to just 2.2 yards per carry. So Estime will certainly face, I think, a tougher test than what he's faced so far this season against Central Michigan, NC State, Tennessee State, or Navy. Notre Dame offense in general will. Sam Hartman has plugged in as advertised, as he did at Wake Forest. He's thrown for 1,061 yards and 13 touchdowns, so getting a lot of points on the board, getting into the end zone often. And Kyle McCord on the flip side for Ohio State has kind of figured things out. He was named the QB1 before last week's game and really did well against the Hilltoppers. He's thrown for 815 yards and 6 touchdowns. And then for the Buckeyes, you've got Travion Henderson, Trip Trainum as a couple of backs, and obviously one of probably the best wide receiver, not too much of a debate on that, Marvin Harrison Jr., who had a really big game also against the Hilltoppers. McCord kind of found that familiar face in Harrison Jr. often in that win. And this one will be a big-time game. Both teams are averaging over 470 yards per game. Both teams are pretty multifaceted. I think Ohio State leans a little bit more towards the pass, although in the first couple games, I think they ran a little bit more maybe than what we expected. Yardage-wise, they came out really firing last week. And then defensively, both of these teams are also well-rounded. They've got a lot of guys on both sides of the ball that are future NFL talents. Notre Dame and Ohio State, year in and year out, are the top teams in that. Ohio State is favored by 3 on the road. Right now, rain is in the forecast. If that happens, it'll, I think, take away from Ohio State a little bit more than it'll take away from Notre Dame. But I do think the Buckeyes, against a Fighting Irish team that hasn't beaten the Buckeyes in 90 years, I think over 90 years, the Buckeyes will be able to get the job done against the Fighting Irish again. So those are my picks, kind of a preview of the Week 4 action. It is a loaded slate. Like I said in the intro, it's one of those Saturdays that we absolutely look forward to as college football fans, that we clear the whole day if we can to sit on the couch in front of the TV and just watch college football all day. So I hope all of you guys watching have a chance to do that, or at least catch most of the action. And without further ado, this is Peter Burtnett college football talk. Have a great rest of your day. See you next time on the channel. Signing out. Peace.